Okay, so today's topic of discussion is the power of focus. And it's funny because I had gone into like a massive rabbit hole. I remember last time when I was praying for you guys, for the singers last week, I don't know what, I know it was definitely God that told me to touch on the fact that energy cannot be created or destroyed, right? It goes out somewhere. So when the singers are singing, the energy is being transferred into other people and then it's being transformed through them and like manifesting in other ways in other people's lives. So that was really cool. But what ended up happening is that I started getting, like I was meditating on that. I was like, what even made me go and say that, right? And then all of a sudden I'm going into a rabbit hole and all of a sudden focus has been the theme that was on my chest for like all week. And I'm like, what do you want? What do you mean focus? What do you mean focus? And then he delivered the message today. So the power of focus. Can anybody tell me, or if anyone knows what the word is, focus? What does focus mean for you? Zero in. Okay, yeah. Okay, putting your mind to something. Yep. Say again? Paying attention to something. Yep. Okay. Okay. Making a picture clearer. Okay. That's good. That's good. All right. Let's go to the first slide. So, before I go into focus, because focus in and of itself doesn't really mean much, right? Because when you're focusing on something, it needs to have an object that you're focusing on. There has to be something on the receiving end, all right? But it takes me all the way back to energy. Kind of like what I touched on last week. So there's two different types of energy, right? And these two categories break into 1,000,001 different things. And we'll touch on them. I thought that picture would look a lot clearer. Okay, so there's two different types of energy. There's kinetic energy, and then there's potential energy, okay? So kinetic energy is energy of motion. So this is the energy possessed by an object or particles due to their movement. And then potential energy is stored energy. And this is the energy that is stored or waiting to be used, often depending on the position or arrangement of parts. So I had done a deep dive on this to see, okay, where did this all begin? Okay, when people talk about energy, and it takes me to the scientific method, right? And that's the law of conservation of energy. And this was done by, I think everybody has heard of E equals mc squared, right? That's like the equation, basically for the whole universe, as Albert Einstein had developed. So the law of conservation states that the energy can be converted in form, but it cannot be created or destroyed. So that means that energy has always been around. Okay? And you can't create new energy, okay? And you can't destroy energy either. It's just transferred. It turns into a different form. Almost like if you use electricity to heat up water, it turns into a gas. And then from a gas, it turns into a liquid. And then from a liquid, it can turn into a solid, right? But the energy hasn't changed, but the form is the thing that has changed. So kinetic energy, motion energy, like this person here on the bike. Then there's electrical energy, okay? So that's the movement of electrons through a wire, for example. Then there's sound energy that comes from our wonderful singers here. Then we have radiant energy, which is what all living vessels need, and that comes from the sun. There's thermal energy, like a toaster, when you're heating up your bread in the morning. And then in potential energy, we have the gravitational one, okay? And that's like if there's an apple on a tree and it falls, when it's in season, that's gravitational energy. Or if you jump, you're going to land back on the floor again. You're not going to go all the way up into space, all right? There's the electrical potential energy. So if you turn a positive to a negative, what happens there? There's elastic energy, all right? So like a bow and arrow, if you pull it back, what's going to happen? Then the force is going to be exerted in a different way. There's chemical energy, and there's nuclear energy. Okay? So there's so many different types of energy, but it stems from the two main types, which is kinetic and potential. Okay? Now, back to the theme. So focus is what we're going to be talking about today. The definition of this is that it is a subject that is being discussed or studied, the subject of which, on which people's attention is focused. And I have underlined attention here. So in 1a, we see the act or the state of applying the mind to something. Okay? So the main purpose, another definition is that it is a main purpose or interest. The technical side of this, like Nora had given with the lens, we see a point at which rays of light or heat or sound meet or form, which they move apart or appear to move apart especially. And another version is a state in which something, such as a camera, a telescope, or a person's eyes, produces a clear image or picture. And in a state in which the small details of a picture or an image can be clearly seen, or a state or condition in which something can be clearly understood. Okay? So that is what we mean by focus. And there are so many different things about this. Like it really drew me into like a massive rabbit hole. And then God had delivered it. And I'm just amazed by the things that He's given me. The thing about it is, there's one thing that I always say every week, that everything that we see is just a reflection of the original design, right? Everything we see or touch or hear, it is just a reflection of the original design, and that nothing is new under the sun. We all know that, right? So let's go to the next slide. So, focus. Attention, as we mentioned before, is the application of the mind. Focus is sustained attention toward an object, a vision, a purpose, or a directive. Okay, so focus in and of itself is not valuable. If you have a lens on a camera, but there's no camera to interpret it, and there's no light, like if you have it in the dark, it's not going to do anything for you, right? So it is sustained attention towards an object, a vision, a purpose, or directive. So whatever receives your focus also receives your attention. Whatever receives your attention receives your energy. Okay? And as we learned, energy can neither be created or destroyed. Whatever receives your energy influences your actions, and whatever influences your actions influences your ultimate outcome. Okay? And there's two scriptures that will be the theme for today. And it's so interesting because Esther had actually said it's like we spoke before, but we didn't. This comes from Hebrews 12, verse 2. Paul's speaking, and he says, we do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus. Okay? And the version of this, it's keeping our eyes, but it's actually, we focus our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. And now he is seated at the place of honor beside God's throne. And we also learn here in the book of Proverbs 4:25 to 27, it says, look straight ahead, fix your eyes, okay, on what lies before you. So it's focus, once again. Look straight ahead, focus on what lies before you. Mark out a straight path for your feet, stay on a safe path, don't get sidetracked, and keep your feet from following evil, okay? We mark out a straight path for your feet to stay on the safe path. How will you know that if there's not a fundamental truth that you're holding on to? Okay, and we're going to touch on that in a little bit. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so the lens. Focus is the lens, or the mind rather, is the lens in which you view life. Okay, and that is the thing, like we have three parts. There's the spirit, there's the soul, and then there's the body. Okay, the soul, or the mind, that has all of your emotions, your memories, all of the things, your will, your desires, all of those things fall under your mind or your soul, okay? Then we have the spirit, which is, that's what connects you to God. That is that piece of Him that dwells within you. And then you have your body. So we are a spirit that has a soul that is living within a body, okay? And in the first slide we see, there is two different types of lenses that is here. We have a converging lens, and then we have a diverging lens. And this was amazing when I had thought about it, and God had shown me that this actually represents a lot of people's lives. The ultimate aim that you would want, that you ought to be, is where for example, your vision, your work, your family, all of these things are all coinciding. And through the lens, all right, which is the mind, all of those things are going towards the vision and purpose that God has for your life. Okay? But what typically happens is more of a divergent lens over on the other side. So for example, there's social media, there's vision, then there's the work, then there's the opinions of others, then you also have family. But what ends up happening here is that they become misaligned. So when light travels into this concave lens, what ends up happening is that everything goes in a bunch of different directions, okay? And that is how you can feel, overstimulated, or that you don't have direction, or you don't know where you're going, or you don't know why you're doing what you're doing. But what it ultimately leads to is distraction, because every part of your life is talking a different language, okay? You can go to church on Sunday, then you'll club on Saturday, then on, every area of your life is speaking a different language, rather than all of them speaking the same language. It's different. A lot of times, it just comes from a lack of awareness, but ultimately, it's the mind. So, we see in Scripture that we want to embody the mind of Christ, okay? And when we have His mind, that means we also have His desires. What ends up happening is that our soul or mind has its own desires, then God has His desires for us. And then what ends up happening is that the body is fighting between the two. There's two battles going on, okay? There's the spirit, which is the conscience, which is what God has given you, all right? That's Him speaking, that's Him living within you. And then there's the soul, which comes from your experiences. It has the fallen nature that is embedded within it. There's a lot of different things there. So it's almost like, that's why it tells us in Romans 7, I do the thing that I don't want to do, but the thing that I know I should do, I can't bring myself to do. But it's not me, but it is sin that lives within me. Okay? So even Apostle Paul is seeing that there's a misalignment, even in what he wants to do, what the spirit wants to do versus what the soul wants to do, and then the body follows whatever one is stronger. All right? So the ultimate aim is to have your spirit subject your soul and also your body, because then you really live in accordance with your fullest purpose and what God wants for you. You have the most peace in that side of things. But a lot of times, our soul is what is the thing that controls you, and then you start feeling guilt when you don't do what it is that you truly wanted to. All right? So, the ultimate vision and the purpose is that big red box that's there in the first one. That lens, everything goes in towards it. And then the mind is what interprets that light or the energy that comes into you. And ultimately, it kind of refracts the light into the place that you want to go for yourself. And because we were created in the image and likeness of God, and this is the thing that's interesting, in every aspect of your life, you can actually control a lot of this, okay? If this is God's ultimate lens, and this is how He views us, okay? And when His mind is ultimately, the red bubble, and that's what He wants for us. And what is happening is there's a bunch of different aspects of our lives that are ultimately going to a direction. It seems aimless to us, but to Him, He knows what the destination is going to be, okay? So our job is to actually just align with Him. Let's go to the next slide so I can touch on it a little bit further. So, focus in practice. Let's look at the example over here again. If your desire, all right, and your focus is that you want to buy a home for yourself, okay? And this could be anything. Insert whatever it is, okay? It's the ultimate goal that you want, or a goal that you want. Not the ultimate, it could be a goal. So if you want to buy a house, are you going to be able to get a house if you never speak, if you don't work? No, unless inheritance comes. And I hope that for you guys. All right? Would you be able to buy a house if you don't know where you want to live? Would you be able to buy a house if you have no savings? Would you be able to buy a house if you don't go and do viewings? Okay? Would you be able to buy a house if there's no reason that you want to buy a house? a lot of times this won't happen because the focus isn't there. You haven't honed in on what it is that you want, okay? So what ends up happening is that all of these categories all align with each other in order for you to get to that ultimate goal, okay? So you get a job, you speak to an agent, you go and start doing viewings for a property, okay? You figure out the location, you start saving and you have a plan in place, okay? You do the viewings and you know the location. Why would you not be able to achieve it? Because your focus is on it. It's where your attention is, it's where your mind is. What typically happens is people want the end goal, but don't do anything in the in the attention side of things. Because what would happen is, let me just go out for dinner. Let me not look at my finances and actually do a breakdown of where my spending is going, so I know how much I can save. You know, where you grow where your energy allows. So your energy follows your attention. And this is the thing. Energy follows attention. Once again, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can just be rerouted. If you know that you wanted to focus on something and something has your attention, we're now living in an attention economy where as soon as you go onto one of these social media apps, you're hooked. The thing that you wanted to go in there for, you've already forgotten. You forgot why you went in there, and all of a sudden now you're scrolling, and you don't know why you're even there, and then an hour has gone by, all right? And it's because the energy was just transferred. It just went somewhere else, right? Even against your own will. And just know, your will is not strong enough, okay? These people are spending billions, like literal billions. No offense, but who are you to think that you can, fight against billions that are being pumped into these apps to get you hooked? The best thing to do is to just delete them, right? Sometimes that's difficult. And even, I've deleted everything, but then YouTube Shorts came, so then it got me. So it's looking for me everywhere I'm going. I don't have social media, but then YouTube Shorts comes, all of a sudden I find myself scrolling, and here I am, so, I don't have TikTok or Instagram. Meanwhile, I go onto YouTube. But this is the thing, your energy follows your attention. And it's funny because we'll actually justify it as well. Be like, no, but I need it for, this is why I need, because for me, I would say I need YouTube. YouTube, I learn on YouTube, but you can learn on TikTok and Instagram too, but scrolling is scrolling. But this is the thing. If I know that I'm not spending enough time doing the right things, and I check my screen time on my phone, and I'm spending all of these hours scrolling, and I'm just like, wait, so if I would have just reallocated this energy into this productive thing, that after 1 year I'd be able to, deliver this much, and you can almost track your output, all right? But sometimes it just doesn't work that way. Once again, who am I to fight people that spend billions to keep me hooked? But your energy follows attention. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It is directed. And your focus determines where that energy goes. So the potential energy represents possibility, and kinetic energy represents movement. So vision, and we had spoken about vision, take this note, Manifest 61, Manifest 62, Manifest 63. Chad had done some really good teachings on vision, and you really want those. You really want to listen to them even after you hear what I'm talking about today. But vision without action remains potential energy, and focus directs energy toward action. And the scriptures for this is, the first one is James 2:17, and it says, so you see, faith by itself isn't enough. Unless it produces good deeds, it is dead and useless. So basically saying faith without works is dead. You can want something, all right, but if you don't do something to make that happen, or the things that are in your control, then it's as though you didn't do anything at all. Your heart's in the right place, but where is your action aligned with that? Okay? And in Philippians 3:13-14, it says, no, dear brothers and sisters, I have not achieved it, but I focus on this one thing, forgetting the past and looking forward to what lies ahead. I press on to reach the end of the race and receive the heavenly prize for which God, through Jesus Christ, is calling us. All right? So even though this is a small interpretation of the grander scheme, like I said before, everything that we see is just a reflection of what's above, okay? So, and because we were made in God's image and likeness, we also have the ability to create and to set a purpose of something, or where our focus can be directed. If somebody wants a job, this is a specific job that somebody wants, I just really believe it's impossible for you not to achieve it if all of your focus and energy goes towards that thing. I just really find it hard to believe. Even people that don't believe in God will set an aim, but because it's a godly principle, God created the universe with the principle that even if you don't believe in Him, it can still make fruit in your life. That's how these people that don't believe in Him can still achieve so much, is because they understand a principle that God didn't make just for Christians. He made no matter what, okay? So it's understanding that. Let's go to the next one. And you can't even see. Okay. Jesus is the focal point. And this is the thing that was super interesting. So this is the mind of God here, okay? We see the focal point, which is Jesus. But even before we get there, the big oval that's right in the middle, that is the mind of God, okay? That is His mind. And what we're seeing here is the lines, these horizontal lines that are going towards the oval. This represents thousands of years. Although it's just a small line on the screen, this represents thousands of years. And everything was pointing towards the coming of Christ. Okay? So the Old Testament, the law was given, it came through the prophets, the covenants were made, and then the promises of God were also made, all right, to the people or children of Israel. And as time went along, in God's mind, all of this was pointing towards the ultimate goal, all right, which was the coming of Christ, all right? And that's what ended up happening. And in Luke 24:27 it says, "Then Jesus took them through the writings of Moses and all of the prophets, explaining from the scriptures the things concerning Himself." He's showing them what was said about Him thousands of years before He was even born. That's crazy, all right? But in the same way, that's how God's mind is, even for each and every one of you here. There is something that was written thousands of years before you were even born, all right? For that to come to pass and to happen in the same way that Jesus was the focal point here. There is something that God created, and you were that focal point, all right? It's hard to believe. Something was spoken about you thousands of years ago that will only be made manifest now that you're here. You know, it can be difficult to grasp something like that. You know, when you think about it, like Isaiah spoke about Christ, talked about how He would even look 700 years before Jesus was even born. And so when we think about what Jesus looked like, we actually currently refer to the book of Isaiah, because in the New Testament it doesn't tell us what Jesus looked like. How crazy is that? So somebody knew what He looked like even before He was here on the earth. And in Ephesians 1:10 it tells us, "And this is the plan. At the right time, He will bring everything together under the authority of Christ." Everything in heaven and on earth. Everything. And that is the mind of Christ. All of that had happened. All of these thousands of years, all of these events, these people that had come and gone, all pointing towards the one source, which became Jesus. Let's go to the next one. So, and because Jesus is the focal point, what ended up happening is that He came, He became the focal point, and then what happened? The diverging of the church came. And that's when He tells us in Matthew 28:19-20, He says, "Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching these new disciples to obey all of the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And it says in Acts 18, before Jesus had ascended, he replied, the Father alone has the authority to set those dates and times, and they are not for you to know. But you will receive the power when the Holy Spirit comes unto you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, in Judea, throughout Judea, and in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. So as we see, once all of the focus came to Jesus, what ended up happening at that point is that he said, okay, perfect. Now that you have seen all of the things that God was planning up until this point, now that we've reached that point, now it's time to separate and to bring this message and to bring it out. And that's where the diverging comes. So the mind of Christ has now went from an internal to now going to an external, frame. And once again, the energy could not be destroyed. It was just transformed. The energy transformed and changed in order for the expansion of the kingdom. Okay? And then we have, let's go to the next one. Joseph. We all know the story of Joseph, and as we can see, the oval in the middle, once again, the lens that is Joseph, or God's mind for him. There were so many things that had happened, and all of these things in Joseph's life. We see that the top one is the dream that he had in Genesis 37, okay? And in that dream, we saw that all of his siblings would be bowing down to him. And when he said it to his father and he said it to his, father and siblings, they had all said, who do you think you are? Because he's the youngest. Who do you think you are having a dream that we would bow down to you? Like, are you crazy? And they really did not like that. But he was the favorite child of his father. What ended up happening after that? His brothers sold him into slavery. They betrayed him, told their father that he was eaten by a lion. And they betrayed him. And they sold him for how many pieces of silver? Does anyone remember? Yeah, they sold him for like 30 pieces of silver or something like that. All right? So they sold their own blood brother into slavery. All right? Then he was in slavery, and he was the servant of Potiphar, okay? And he served Potiphar, and Potiphar was, let's just say, a prime minister, all right? Well, no, prime minister is like the highest authority. Who would be below prime minister? Let's just say, someone that works for the prime minister. Joseph worked for that guy, okay? And he worked for him for a couple of years, and he was trusted, so much so that this guy his only job was to basically sign his signature on things. It's just to say, yes, I approve, no, I don't approve. Joseph took care of his whole entire life, made sure that everything was running smoothly. Potiphar's wife wanted him, okay? And what he ended up doing is that he ran, but in running, she managed to grab a piece of his cloth and then lied and said that Joseph tried to take advantage of her. So what ended up happening? He was thrown in jail, okay? So at first he, is betrayed by his siblings. He's sold into slavery. Things are looking well for him. Something falls again. He's put into jail this time. Then when he's in jail, there's two people that are in jail with him. And those two people used to work for Pharaoh, which is the king of all of Egypt, okay? And the two of them just so happened to be put into the same jail. And what ended up happening was that the two of them had dreams. And Joseph just so happened to have the ability to interpret dreams, okay? And mind you, before I even go further, all of this is happening kind of concurrently. It's not like one thing happens and then another thing happens and then another thing happens. It's like you get to the end, okay, this line is now finished, all right? Then we go to the next part. Okay, this line is now finished. But the thing that's interesting, and I wish we had the ability to know at which point the story ends, and then we go to the next season, and then if only we knew how many of those would be required in order for us to finally get to what God really wants for us. If only. We do have the ability on a small scale. You can set a goal for yourself. I want to buy a house in 2 years. I want to find the love of my life in this time. I want to do this in this time. I want to achieve these goals, and you can put steps towards that. So this is one way we have a little piece of that control. But the ultimate goal, the overarching, mind, it's difficult for us to know. All we can do is to trust in what he had said to us before. All right? But anyway, the two prisoners are in there with him. He interprets their dream. One of the dream, he said, you're going to be beheaded. And then the other one, he said that you're going to be reinstated, okay, back in your previous position again. And he said, before you go, please don't forget about me. Tell Pharaoh that I helped you with this dream. But when he was released, he completely forgot, okay? He completely forgot about Joseph. And then 2 years goes by, a famine hits, and the guy that was released just remembered, I remember there was a guy, actually before a famine hits, Pharaoh had a series of dreams and he couldn't shake the dreams. He didn't know what they meant. He had all of these people to come and interpret the dreams, and they couldn't interpret the dreams for him, okay? Everyone was wrong. Then, was it the cupbearer or the baker? It was one of them. He remembered that Joseph was in jail and he had helped him. So he sent for him. Joseph interpreted the dream, and then he was reinstated into one of the highest positions in all of the land. Okay? Absolutely amazing how it ended up happening for him. But then his siblings came, and when his siblings came, we saw that they didn't even recognize their brother. They didn't know who he was. So what ended up happening is that he told them, I'm Joseph, the one that you sold into slavery. But what did he say to them? And this is the thing that's interesting about God's purposes for your life, is that the purpose here, when God created Joseph, he said, Joseph, this is your purpose, the saving of many lives. So that's what he wrote in the book, even before he was born, okay? So then what did Joseph say to his siblings in Genesis 50, verse 20? He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And that was the purpose in which God had put Joseph through everything. And in order to get that, Joseph had to go through all of this hardship. I think it was 17 years that he had experienced this hardship, all right? 17 years. That's like if you're, just born. By the time you are almost a legal adult, that's how much time had gone past. Joseph was in the dumps, basically. But this is the thing that you have to realize. Joseph, we wouldn't even hear about Joseph if he did not believe the truth about who he was in God. Like he said to his siblings, he said, but God intended it for good. So in this whole time, while he's experiencing all of this hardship, he's actually trusting God. He's like, God, I'm in jail for something I didn't even do. What did I do to deserve this? My siblings sold me into slavery. All of this is happening to me. For what reason? But he says, you know what? I know God is true. I know that God is good. In spite of everything that's happening right in front of my eyes, I know that I can trust his precepts. So in the same way, when we're experiencing things in life, you might be going through the top one, where you have a dream and it hasn't come to fruition, where you might have been betrayed, where somebody might have said something to you, or you made a promise and didn't keep it. Or you're not where you want to be in your life currently. Or that every time you've set a goal, for some reason it's not being hit. But what I can say is that if you trust what God says about you, Jeremiah 29:11, if you think Jeremiah 29:11 is true, which is, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of good and not of evil, to bring you to an expected end, or to give you a hope and a future. If you believe that, then it's not a matter of if, it's when. It's not a matter of if, it's when. So when God sees you, he sees that focal point. He sees what the end is going to be when he's looking through the lens. And in life, the lens that you view life is ultimately what is going to bring you the fruit in the end, or the outcome. All right? Because what could happen is, he could have easily, let's go back to the divergent. Yes, For example, this could have been Joseph as well. Although Jesus used this for the original purpose, which is to spread the goodness of God. Once again, everything is a reflection of what's above. This could also be used in the negative context, all right? Where something like the top line comes in, it hits that and it goes straight up. So it's not pointing towards what God's purpose was for you. You got discouraged because the soul had experienced some trauma from family or something like that in the past, all right? Rejection, fear, insecurity. All of these things could easily create that divergent thinking, where instead of having all of the thoughts come in a positive manner, they all come in and they all go out in a different direction instead of pointing into the same one, okay? So imagine Joseph is sold into slavery, and that first one automatically goes completely out of the way, and he says, well, maybe I was just not destined for this. Maybe that dream was just a lie, and he believed it. And now, let's just say he's in Potiphar's house, and that ends up happening. And he says, I knew it. I am cursed. Why is everything bad happening to me? I've never done anything to anybody. Why do I deserve these results that are happening in my life? All right? This can happen in the negative aspect as well. And this is what you really want to be careful about, because once again, the lens is the mind in which you view life. So when somebody says something, people can view it from a place of offense, and there's offense that's there. You can never give offense, you can only take offense. So somebody says something to you, and you take the offense. There's the offense, and you take it, and you say, that's mine. Now you've taken offense to this, all right? When realistically, you could have just let it go, all right? Sometimes it's easier said than done, you know? I get it, we're all human at the end of the day, right? But my aim here is to spread truth. And the truth is, offense can only be taken, not given. And it's not your job to take it. Okay? Go back to the divergent. So, when we see this happening in our lives, it is up to you. When you, like I always say this, that this, like if we're seeing the weather's bad outside, and you know we live in Ireland, right? So we don't have the best weather. But what do I always say? Who could tell me? Somebody knows. When the weather's bad outside, what do I always say? Who said that? €10 for you. I always say, yes, Diana. The sunshine is within, okay? And Salim. The sunshine is within, all right? Because at least when you know that the sunshine is within, it doesn't matter what the weather is outside. That's out of your control. What's in control is the weather that is within your earthen vessel, okay? And once again, it is the lens in which you view life. If anything that sets back, you look at the bright side, okay? They say glass half full rather than glass half empty. We're all glass half full in here, I know. You know? You always want to be a convergent thinker. It's when you take all of the information that's coming in, okay, the different pieces of the puzzle, and you converge them into the main focal point. And that is what allows you to focus on what it is that you want to achieve. When God gives you a dream or a vision, or He gives you a word, it is your job to take all of the information that is there. For example, the light that travels into an eye, all right? And this is really where I got the lens from, right? I'm looking at the eyeball, and I'm thinking, well, if they say that the eye is the alleyway into the heart, okay, that's why you have to watch what you see with your eyes, and why you have to take heed to what you are absorbing. So when you're scrolling on your phone and you're getting information, all of a sudden you don't know why you're feeling sad, or you don't know why you're comparing yourself to others. You don't know where it came from, or where you even got an opinion from. You don't really know where it came from, but it came from, like, you know, the scrolling. You don't know what the source was. You don't know why you feel that you're not doing good enough. But it's because you were completely fine until you saw other people's lives, you know? And that's the divergent thinking. You saw somebody else's life, and you took somebody else's step 50 and their result, and you're comparing it to your step 1 and thinking that they're going to be the same. Why am I not there? But do you know what they had to go through in order to get to where you think that they didn't basically have to work or to experience to get to that point? You know? And it happens with a lot of people in here. People will look at you guys and say, what did they do? And then as a result, you'll also look at others and say, what did they do? And trust me, that continues and it never ends. That will continue. But ultimately, understanding that the mind is the lens in which you view life. And when that mind is rooted in God's precepts, in His Word, the way you view life will also be in accordance with that. And the outcomes that come from the actions that you take that are in accordance with that truth, the fundamental truth, will ultimately be how you continuously achieve all of those focal lengths. And then the bigger picture comes, and that's when God allows you to narrow down and to focus on what it is that He had for you and what He wrote in His will for your life. Let's go to the next one. No. So, what you consistently focus on becomes the lens through which you interpret reality. Circumstances may not make sense, and the path may be unclear, and the outcome may not yet be visible. But if your focus remains rooted in God's truth, like we see in Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the thoughts that I think towards you, thoughts of good, not of evil, to bring you a hope and a future, or an expected end. If you know that God's word is true, then what you're going through currently, all right, is all taking you towards that end point, which you know is good. So why worry? This is why Christ spoke so much about not worrying about tomorrow, because your end is a good one. Your end is a good one. All right? Your attention, your energy, and your actions will follow that truth. If your focus remains rooted in God's truth, your attention, your energy, and your actions will follow that truth. And in time, the fruit will reveal what you chose to believe. And when we say fruit, that is the result. When you look at somebody, if you want to see what somebody believes, look at their fruit. That will show you a lot of times. And that's why Jesus says, you shall know them by their fruit, because there'll be wolves in sheep's clothing. So you look at their fruit. You can see on paper they can come up and speak so well, but then you see them privately and they're talking to you in a different way, or you're in a restaurant and they speak to a waiter really disrespectfully, but to somebody that's in authority, they speak with respect. That shows you the fruit. It doesn't matter what they say. Those are the things to keep an eye on. All right? Because once again, the fruit will reveal what you choose to believe. And what that person clearly believes is that if you're below me, I don't like you. If you're above me, I like you. All right? And in the same way, this encompasses every aspect of somebody's life. So you want your focus to remain on Him. And you want your focus to remain rooted in His Word. Then, as a person that's created in His image and likeness, what ends up happening is that you can then create a reality to hit those goals that you have. It's not a matter of if you're going to achieve those things that are on your heart, as long as they're aligned with God's will. It's when. And when those things are aligned, it's impossible for you not to achieve them. So I know that there's prayers that are on everybody's hearts here. Things that you want to happen or to manifest in your life. It's not a matter of if. As long as it's aligned with God's will for your life, it's impossible for it not to work. So it either works or it works. You know? It either works or it works. It's not, oh, but what if it doesn't? Is it aligned with God's will? Is it aligned with His purposes, with His goodness in your life? Then I don't see how it won't be able to happen. And this is the thing that's interesting. When we bought our home, what we did is that we just focused our energy on where we wanted to live. And we said, okay, we looked at a map we highlighted, okay, these are the places that we want to buy our home. And we said, anything else, we're not looking at it. So we refused to look at, even if there was a good offer that came, we refused to look anywhere except for the place that we focused. And then what happened is that we then had to focus on all of the different aspects of buying a home. Like I said before, you speak to the agent, you see what's required, you check what schemes are available, you check how much you're going to need, you check all of these things, all right? Your focus goes in those areas. But if our focus was, and then we're looking at villas in Italy while we're also doing this, it's divergent thinking. Your energy is being separated. At each stage of your life, you dedicate all of your attention, okay? Because once your attention is on something, that is where the energy goes. And once again, energy is being transformed. So a physical energy from how we want to look at something, all right? So we're looking at this now, but the energy that you're using to look at this will eventually be transformed into something else. Because what's going to happen is, you'll now think, okay, well, let me just focus. And because of a word that I said from my voice, you will then say to yourself in your mind, actually, do you know what? Let me focus my energy on this one area of my life and see what it takes in order for me to achieve it. That energy that you're putting in creating the steps and putting the plan together, that will then dictate your actions towards that goal. Why would it not happen? Why would it not happen in your life? So that is my teaching today. And I just thought that it was very interesting how right now God decided to give me this message to teach. So let us stand, and I'd like to pray for us.